Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3. Please consider this a bonus episode because we're not actually going to be doing any building. I'm just going to go over NewGRFs and game settings. So to start out, I want to talk about the industry NewGRFs, go through some of the main options, and why I chose BSPI first. So industry sets. First option is vanilla, which is pretty simple. Best cargoes to deliver probably coal, goods, and passengers in terms of the money you get in. And the main interesting game mechanic is that you need to deliver good service to the stations to get the most, to get cargo output to increase for the primary industries. And the set's also good because it's familiar to everyone since it comes with the game. Alright, FIRS, which stands for FIRS Industry Replacement Set. It's a little bit more complicated than vanilla. The main mechanic is with engineering supplies and farm supplies. Basically, you can take these cargoes and deliver them back to the primary industries, which lets the primary industries increase their production. So it sort of creates a little bit of a feedback loop, but there are only 3 different tiers of production for the primary industries. So you can't just deliver infinite engineering supplies to a single primary. You have to, you want to distribute it to make sure you don't waste it. And then the rest is just, following whatever path you feel like to complete the loop. So downsides are that it's a little complicated, and a lot of that complexity doesn't really add that much to the game in terms of gameplay, but the sort of feedback loop mechanic is fun to work with. And FIRS has a few different variations, like here's the most extreme setup. I don't actually know if this is in the most recent release, but it has been in the past at least, and it still really revolves around engineering supplies and farm supplies, but even more complicated. ECS vectors, one nice feature, lets you pick and choose which of these vectors you want to play with, so you can sort of control the complexity. But it gets compared with FIRS a lot, and people say FIRS is better. I don't really know, I haven't played with ECS very much. And finally, Yeti, which is made by V453,000. This is probably the most difficult industry set there is to work with or to play with. Nothing actually has any base production besides the worker yard, so that's what you're going to have to start with. And it takes the whole FIRS idea of having a feedback loop and pushes it to an extreme. So the actual chart here, the graph here, isn't too complicated, but you can see there's a whole bunch of these feedback loops. And the way it works is that when you deliver these cargoes, and you deliver all of the cargoes, you get bonuses. So basically, you can create feedback loops that will give you effectively infinite cargo. So what usually ends up happening is you just have huge stations to deal with production that's in the tens of thousands of units, and you don't actually need to ever service more than one of each type of industry. So you usually end up with, however many industries there are here. You end up with a station for each of them. There's a lot of logistics in how to split up the cargo evenly in these supply chains. So you can use logic there or split orders. But I don't like dealing with stations that are huge that much, so didn't go with Yeti. It's also pretty unfamiliar to people who haven't played the game very much. So why BSPI then? It's not a very well-known industry set, but it is very similar to vanilla. It's kind of like vanilla ++. So all the industries are the same, but there are a few new interactions between different industries. So for example, the power station is needed to supply power to the other secondary industries. The town population affects the production of valuables by the bank. And the delivering of valuables affects the production of the primary industries in the town. So BSPI encourages the player to deliver more than just one type of cargo because they all interact in some way. So I chose this because it would be familiar to people who weren't familiar with the other NewGRFs, but it also adds some interesting game mechanics that will make this game a little more interesting than just a plain vanilla. And it also still has the game mechanic of better service equals higher production, but it is limited by the valuables. And for train set, we have Nuts Unrealistic Train Set made by V453,000. So Nuts gives a whole lot of variety and different viable options to the player. So basically all of these trains at the bottom are considered viable endgame choices. And each of the columns is a different class of vehicle. So we have super strong vehicles. Like one of these vehicles could easily carry our 10-tile long trains. Strong, medium, and fast. The spectrum up to really fast trains, but might have bad acceleration. Then there are the passenger trains, intercity and local. Chameleon trains or type of monorail. Meow trains are interesting because they change their stats based on what color track they're on. So they interact with per rainbow rails. Wet rails are a different type of track that looks like canals or rivers. So that's interesting for theming, and they're also really good for feeders because they have high capacity. And some other things, logic trains, brain melter, etc. So the ones I'm actually thinking of for late game is going to be the maglev medium get heavy over here. It's a little bit broken. The acceleration is really good for a medium class vehicle. Some of the passenger trains in the intercity and local are also broken because they have really high capacity. But overall, this train set gives the most variety by far of any train set that I've seen. So for the other NewGRFs, I have base cost mod just set up to make raising and lowering land 8 times as expensive and clearing water 32 times as expensive. Doesn't really matter for single player that much, but just to discourage that. For road vehicles, we have Roadhog. NewGRFs is also popular. I don't really have a strong opinion either way. Same for our boat set, which is Squid 8 Fish, and airplane set, which is AV8 aircraft set. I don't know if we'll even get to use those. Probably use at least the road vehicles. Then ISR for the train stations that I've been using. They look really nice and they're really easy to use, as well as chip station set, which is good with furs, but I like to keep it always just for extra variety. And then we have tunnel cosmetic changes, bridge cosmetic changes, and depot cosmetic changes. I think this last one you only can get with the OpenTTD Coupe GRF pack, so you can look that up on the wiki if you really want it. Alright, that is it for NewGRFs. Next, game settings. So the main ones, I guess, are I have vehicle breakdowns off because a huge main line carrying thousands of trains would be in a lot of trouble if a breakdown happened on it. I have thought about trying to design networks around breakdowns, but it would probably be pretty difficult. So that's off, and that's how I have pretty much always played. Another thing, cargo distribution is off or set to manual. When I first started playing OpenTTD, cargo dist was not part of the vanilla game, so I've never played with it, and I haven't messed with it at all. But I've heard that it can be fragile for a lot of things. So for example, one thing I'm considering doing on this map is making a self-regulating network. And that's basically when we have some trains that have no orders or very few orders, and then forcing them around the network using logic or Pathfinder traps instead of orders, basically. And that completely breaks cargo dist. So not playing with that. I've never played with it. And we'll take a brief look at the rest of the settings. Units, I set the volume units to be meters cubed, which will be 1-to-1 to the actual in-game or internal representation of units in the game. Same with the other units as far as I know. Those are 1-to-1 with the actual internal representation. Graphics, nothing in there. Sound, have most of the sounds off. We could change that if people want to hear more sounds, I guess. Interface, main thing, gotta have show path reservations for tracks on, because you can see when we have that on, we can see that this train is reserving the X, so it won't let other trains in. So that's why we have that two-way path signal there. So that setting is very useful for debugging your networks. And news. So I have most of the news features off just because it tends to get very spammy when you have a lot of trains. Now, of particular note, I guess, are the warnings for vehicle orders and vehicle income and pathfinding. All of these are off just because, for example, with self-regulating networks, this will always complain about vehicles' orders just because the orders aren't what's controlling the train. It's fancier than that, but the game doesn't realize that, of course. Vehicle income can be negative, whatever. Overall, I'll be making money anyway. Vehicles are lost. This can happen in overflows and reversers. It happens on purpose. So I'm designing the network intentionally to make the vehicles lost, I guess. So I don't want to see that warning all the time. And subsidies I don't bother with. Economic changes, industries, don't really care about. Anyway, keep going. World generation I showed in the first episode at the very beginning. Environment, I guess authorities are permissive. I could change this. I mean, there are ways to deal with local authorities. Some are more cheaty than others. But yeah, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Towns can affect town growth and etc. We might change some of the settings, like for funding industries and funding towns if we need to. Yeah, but we'll change that if it becomes an issue. Same with max station spread and max vehicle length. Those might change in the future if I need to build really big stations or long trains for some reason. I think it's set to 64 already though, so shouldn't be too soon when that happens. All right, I think that's about it. All right, hopefully that was informative, and if you have any questions, please leave them down below. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll get back to building in episode 4. See you then.